Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, or welcome along if it's your first time, of course. I thought I'd do something slightly different today. You regular viewers will know that I mostly focus on reviews and unboxings, first reactions of new figures, but what with the re-release of this little fella here, Badcube's Grump, I thought I'd do a retrospective review, just because I know he's dropping around now and there are several people out there who have mentioned him to me as a figure they're looking for, and so I thought it would be quite interesting just to take a look back, as he's currently the only option available for a masterpiece scale gears, or certainly an acceptable one in my view. So obviously this won't take the same form as a usual review because I've already unboxed the figure, played around with it a bit, so I'm just going to give a quick overview of both modes, go over the articulation and some thoughts, etc. So for those of you who don't like my longer videos, I am hoping that this one will be a little bit shorter, although I make no promises. So give me a second and I'll be back with a quick look at what we get in the packaging. Okay, and we're back with a look at the box, and pretty tidy, usual Badcube stuff, some nice artwork on it, shows off both modes, albeit artist impression of them, but they're actually pretty accurate to the figure in both modes. You've got his tech specs there on the back and a few more pictures of the figure, or artist impression of the figure. Other than that, it's pretty standard colour coordinated box, nice and compact, not a lot of waste on this one. Sometimes small figures come in huge boxes, which really bugs me, so this doesn't take up a lot of space, which is great. So that's the box out of the way. Obviously you also get an instruction manual, which for this guy is nice and clear and in colour as well, which I always appreciate. A lot of manuals are obviously mono. This tells you in fairly easy steps how to transform him. Lets you know that you can store the weapon in alt mode, shows you what he should look like, and then some of the gimmicks that you can do, and then a concept art gallery for an alternate Grump there. So pretty standard fare, but a nice looking manual all the same. And next up we have these collector cards, of which there are not one but two, and obviously they're slightly different. You have here a slightly happier looking Grump, you know, not a care in the world, and there you have probably the more familiar miserable looking Grump. Gears never being the most satisfied character in the series, shall we say. And obviously you have the usual stuff. This is more of a masterpiece, an official masterpiece style card with the way it's laid out, with the tech specs there, and this is more of a Badcube sort of specific one. Obviously this is Chinese language and this is English language, so you have his bio there and his tech specs, which I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure they will mirror the official line, so that the Marvel and official G1 tech specs. I'd be very surprised if they don't. So yeah, nice that you get the two of them. A couple of little cards there, which I always appreciate. Anyway, that's enough talking about the box and the manuals. Let's get to looking at the figure himself. Here we go. I've started with the figure in alt mode, which is not how he comes out of the box, I will say, but that's because I want to put him back in bot mode eventually for display, and I didn't really want to have to transform him from bot mode to vehicle and then back to bot mode again. So I put him into vehicle mode earlier while I was practicing the transformation. So apologies that it's backwards, but I'm not going to show the transformation anyway because that's not really what my channel's about. And there are a few fiddly bits which I will probably mess up on camera anyway, but I will mention those as we take a look at the figure. So as you can see, it's a pretty decent representation of Gears' G1 alt mode. Obviously not spot on, but you know, these things rarely are completely accurate from third parties. But this is a pretty good approximation of his alt mode. Not obviously accurate to the sort of more chibi style, but this is a more real world interpretation of his alt mode, which I still think looks pretty good. And obviously I really like the blue and red colour scheme. As a big Spider-Man fan, I like that, and this is actually one of my son's favourite Transformers, just because he's a huge Spider-Man fan and he loves the blue and the red together. Now, if we take a look around, There are a few areas where, you know, you've got some hollowness at the back there, which doesn't look fantastic, but, you know, it's acceptable, isn't it? It does have a few issues tabbing together in some places. I found that these side tabs here on the figure, they are a bit of a pain to get in. There's always a bit of a gap, so there seems to always be a bit of a gap with the hood section here, particularly in the front there. It doesn't look too bad head on, you know, where you can see the grille and the headlights, they look fine. But when you look at it side on, that's where you see that gap. And obviously, the cab, you can see his folded up robot limbs in there, etc. So it's not the cleanest alt mode ever. But, you know, when you see what they've done, they've compacted the robot quite nicely, I think. From underneath, you can very obviously see that it is a bot. There's some detailing there, which will be covered up by the chest piece in bot mode. This at the back, you can see, is where the weapon storage is. And he's got a nice little blaster there, which I'll go over in more detail when we talk about bot mode. The worst bit I found to actually get together was this whole front cab section. It has to open up and expand, and then it tabs on to two little pegs on the front of the hood, or two little pegs tab into the hood, I should say. But you also have to tab this chest piece here onto two pegs there, but at the same time you have to get the wheels onto two pegs that you flip out, and trying to get all of that aligned and pushed in and clicked in and whatever without one popping out. It seemed every time I pushed one in, the other would spring off and things like that. That took a little bit of time and was slightly frustrating. Whereas the top, the arms and the legs, etc., the back of the vehicle, that was relatively easy. It was a piece of cake by comparison. So a bit of frustration with the front, but by and large, not a difficult transformation, just a little bit annoying in places. But, you know, as a vehicle, it looks pretty good. It can roll. I say it can roll. It can roll when you get the wheels aligned properly. It's you know, not going to win any awards for alt mode of the year or anything like that, but it does a good enough job, and it evokes the spirit of the character, I feel. So anyway, that's enough talking about what is ultimately a fairly bland alt mode. I'm going to get it transformed up off of camera, and we'll be right back with a quick look at the robot mode. Okay, we're back with robot mode, and I have to say that this is one of those times I wish I'd actually done the transformation on camera, because it probably took me 2 or 3 minutes to do that from alt mode to bot mode. Much easier going from the vehicle mode into the robot mode, because I didn't have to contend with tabbing all those tricky pieces in. It was much easier going the other way. So here he is in all of his glory, and he's a fine looking little fella, I think. I'll bring him a little bit closer to the camera so you can take a look. I've had him for a while, so I've pre-applied a water slide there. It's about the smallest one I could get in there without it looking silly. It's sort of coming off a bit, which is a bit of a pain, but when you're dealing with water slides of that size, it's very difficult to get them on in one piece. Anyway, it does the job. But there you can see he has pretty accurate proportions to the tomb model. There are some things that aren't quite right, which I'll go into in a second. But overall, he's very reminiscent of the character model, I think, and very evocative of the character overall. And looking at him a bit closer, you can see there he has got a big smile on his face at the moment, which is possibly not what you'd associate with this character. But it's a nice looking sculpt, and I think the head sculpt in general, the face and the head, are pretty accurate to the character. And you know who he is at first glance, don't you? So yeah, looking around from all angles really, he looks pretty decent. He cleans up very well. I mean, you can see the backpack's very slim, hides. I mean, you can see the wheels, I know, but it does clean up pretty well. And obviously all of that stuff that I mentioned before compresses and fits in that backpack, which is pretty nice engineering. The backs of the legs, sure, you can see a little bit again, but you know, I've got masterpiece figures costing 300 quid that have the same thing, so I can cut that a bit slack. The arms look pretty good, the torso, the legs, everything. I've mentioned this curse before, and really it is the only thing I don't like about this figure, and that's the feet. And Badcube just can't do feet. They do pretty good bots that really look the part until you get down, usually until you reach the knees. Sometimes the lower legs, the shins are okay, but then every time you hit the feet, they're just a mess. They're like an afterthought. I really you know, that's the big lament of Badcube figures. It's really the only reason why I want to swap out their Huffer for the Fans Toys version, because, yeah, and again, with this, I'd be pretty content with this if it wasn't for those feet. But it's a very minor thing, and they're probably one of the least egregious looking or pairs of feet on a Badcube figure, so I can live with it. Anyway, that's enough of me talking about the aesthetics. You can obviously see what it looks like on camera. So we'll just do a quick articulation checklist, shall we? Okay, as demonstrated slightly earlier, first up we have a head swivel, and you can get a pretty good range of motion on that, and you can almost go all the way around if you sort of wasn't for these two notches by the backpack there, but you know, you're not really going to want to do that anyway, so you get about as much range of motion out of that as you're going to need to. Sadly, no up or down, I'm afraid. The shoulders are on a ball joint and can do 360, and they have a good range of motion out to there, and then a little bit higher because the ball joint is on a peg here, which actually moves itself. So you can get up to like the horizontal, which is not too bad, and you have to be careful though you don't pop the side out like I just did. You also get a bicep swivel here, which you would expect. That's a pretty standard Masterpiece figure, so it's nice that they've engineered it in such a small figure. You get a pretty deep elbow bend, but it's not double jointed, so it doesn't go any further than that, but still, that's pretty much all you're going to need, and it doesn't look too unsightly either from that angle. Sadly, there is no wrist swivel, but you do get slight up and down motion for what it's worth. It's not really an intentional articulation point, just a side effect of the transformation, but it's there, and someone, I guess, could make use of that potentially. Next up, we have a nice waist swivel, which is nice and stiff actually. It's not floppy or anything, so he can get some pretty dynamic looking poses. Unfortunately, no ab crunch on this one, but you know, it's a tiny figure. It's quite an old design now, so that doesn't come as any surprise, but I'm glad we've got a nice waist swivel there. Legs are also on a ball joint, so at the hip you get 90 degrees out, and it's pretty stiff actually for what it is. I haven't applied any floor polish to this, so that's how it is. And he can kick all the way up almost to horizontal, and then he can kick all the way back to the horizontal as well, so you've got a good range of motion in the legs, and you also get a little bit of thigh swivel off of that ball joint as well. Okay, at the knees you don't actually get too much because of this panel here, so that's honestly as far as you'll go, which really is a little disappointing for some, I'm sure. And you can't really even unpeg this because it reveals all of the wheel assembly that's sort of inside the hollow piece there. So not a huge amount. He does have like a little bit of articulation there as well, just because of the way the knee is arranged, so it can go back and forth and bend. But it really doesn't give you a huge amount extra. You can get sort of up to there, which is about as far as he'll go, which isn't even sort of horizontal. It's a little bit disappointing really, but you know, again, at a figure this size you can kind of understand and forgive, particularly when some much larger and more expensive figures have the same issue. And to be honest, when you're posing and standing, you don't really ever need too much more than that. Okay, and coming down to the much maligned feet, well, you have a pretty good range of motion actually, because they're on a ball joint, so you have a lot of ankle tilt there. You can go side to side, and you have a lot of toe tilt because of this separate hinge here. And you can also go up a little bit on that ball joint. So you actually have a good range of motion, a stable platform there if you want to put him into some pretty dynamic poses. So all things considered, you know, this figure actually has a pretty good set of articulation. And there you go. I've put him into a slightly more dynamic pose so you can see just what he can pull off when you want, and that ankle rocker there really helps to enable him to pull off some slightly more dynamic poses than you might think he could do. Let's have a look at some of the stuff he comes with as well. So accessory wise, you don't get a huge amount, but you get a blaster here, which is pretty standard stuff. I can't tell you whether this is accurate to Gears' weapon in the show, because I quite honestly don't really remember him firing his weapon in the show. But yeah, it looks plausible enough. And that just fits into the moulded hand there, which I actually like, because it means there are no issues tabbing, and he can hold it very, very steadily, very firmly, and he can point it and have that gleeful look on his face as he blasts away at Decepticons. You get a couple of other pieces as well, and they take the form of those things that he used in that one episode, which we all love. You've got a little welding accessory here, which I will try and show you up close. And you also have a little personality tape or circuit or component, whatever it was, from the episode Changing Gears, which I will demonstrate in a second. So anyway, with this welding piece, it's pretty standard for most Masterpiece figures. I'm sure you know, you open up the forearm here, you hide the hand away, close that back up, and then that creates the space here for you to pop that in, and there you go, his welding tool is attached, and that's nice and firm. You know, you can dangle him off of that, that's not going anywhere, which is more than I can say for a lot of Masterpiece figures. For the other piece, the personality component, I will say it is a bit of a pain to install, or more accurately, it's a little bit of a pain to remove once installed. To install it, it's actually not too bad. You just take the chest piece here, flip it up. It's on a ball joint, but it can actually articulate, so you can lift it up quite high, and then you'll see there's a slot inside the chest piece, which is also nicely detailed and quite show accurate from memory. And you literally just take that and pop it in, and that's it. It's in there. As I said, putting it in is much easier. I needed a tool to get it out earlier, so I'm not sure I'll be able to do it now. Nope, I don't have the nails or the patience, I'm afraid, so that can stay in there. But then you just push the chest piece back down, and that is that. It's done. Now he does have one other gimmick, which is pretty good actually, especially for the character. With a character with his personality, shall we say, and that is the face. So you simply flip this piece up here, and then you'll notice there's a screw there, and you can actually rotate the face around on that screw and push it back down, and suddenly Grump is living up to his name. His I guess his stoic, miserable face, whatever you want to call it, I really like it. I think it's a really nice face sculpt, and that is actually how I choose to display the character the majority of the time. I don't really play with my bots once they're on the shelf. I'm a display person, so I usually pick the pose and the face sculpt I want and leave them, and that's how I have this guy displayed, looking as miserable as he normally does. As you can see, that's a perfect little face for taking out his enemies. Okay, let's get him sort of tidied up, and then I'll be back with some final thoughts. Okay, so what do we think about this guy overall? Well, personally, I think it's a fantastic little figure. I was really lucky to get hold of it, I think on the first or second reissue, and I think it only cost me £45. It's gone up in price a little bit now from what I can tell. It seems to be hovering around the £50 to £60 mark from what I've seen. Kapow Toys currently have it listed on their site for just under £50. It says it's out of stock, but they say it's been delayed to the end of October, so I don't know if that means they're completely sold out of stock or whether they just don't have stock in to sell at the moment and it will be available again. But there are also copies on eBay that I've seen going for 50 to 60 quid as well, so it is available, and it's also available from the usual US retailers as well. So for the money I paid, and certainly even for the money it's going now, I think this is a really, really great little figure. It's not completely 100% toon accurate, but it is certainly close enough that it looks great on the shelf. It fills that Gears-shaped void in my life, and you know, I'm sure someone can do a better job. Someone can always do a better job with the benefit of hindsight and time, but it's, you know, not something that I look at and think I have a desperate urge to swap that out. Unlike something like Cliff Jumper or Wind Charger, where I'm like thinking to myself, I really could do with another option for that. This little guy, if he sits on my shelf for another year or two or even longer and there's no other option, I won't be too disheartened. He slots in really nicely scale-wise alongside the other mini bots, so he's roughly the same height as B and Wind Charger and Cliff Jumper, etc., which he should be. And he's that little bit smaller than Brawn and Huffer, which is right for the scale. So he works well with both the official Masterpiece and Fans Toys scale. So I'm pretty happy there overall. So yeah, I honestly, if you're in the market for a Masterpiece scaled gears, which if you're a G1 fan, why wouldn't you be? You know, you probably want to complete your ARC collection at the very least. This guy is an absolute no-brainer, and I would say that, you know, if you can pick it up for around the same price I did, it's an absolute steal as well. You know, this is worth every penny I paid for it and more. And I do miss the days when we could pay sort of £45 for a mini bot. And it looks like, you know, from Franz Toys, that's not happening anytime soon, is it? So kudos to Badcube. We thought they were dead, but they're obviously rinsing everything they can out of their older moulds and reissuing these figures at fairly respectable prices. So, as I promised at the top of the video, I'm not going to do my usual marathon today. This is or blather on about figures and repeat myself ad nauseum. I just wanted to do this quick retrospective review because I thought a few people out there might get a kick out of it. It's something that actually a couple of people have mentioned to me as things they'd like to see from the channel. So I you know, like to listen to people and give them what they can if the opportunity arises. So I'm hoping to do a few more of these retrospective reviews in the future as and when I get the time, while I'm waiting for new figures to come in. Speaking of which, I am also waiting on the Robot Paradise acoustic wave. That is due in, I believe, this week with my supplier. So I'm hoping to bring a review of that next week. I've already seen some early images and video of it, and it does look really good. Although I was disappointed to see some comparisons with MP13 to see it's half a head taller. So in my head, it's now a full head too tall. But that's the only complaint that I can make so far from what I've seen. So it's looking good. I'm hoping it's going to be a nice positive review for a change. So that should be coming fairly soon, hopefully. Also would like to say a big thank you to all of the people who subscribe to the channel. I have just surpassed 500 subscribers, which I'm told will allow me to start putting out community posts, which is something that I was quite alarmed to learn I couldn't do until recently. And you used to have 1,000 subscribers to do that, but they've recently lowered it to 500. So I'm told that will come online within the next week. And then I can start to do proper updates for the channel, teasers of what's coming next, etc. A bit more viewer engagement, etc. So look forward to that, or look out for that, I should say. So anyway, it just remains for me to say thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have enjoyed this short little look at Badcube's Grump. If you like this format of video, please let me know in the comments. Obviously, long-time viewers will know that my videos tend to be very conversational, and they will go on and on. You know, a short review for me is usually pushing an hour. So I am mindful of that. I know that a lot of people do appreciate those longer videos, which are the sort of videos I like, and that I make the content I enjoy, and hope that people get a kick out of that. But I also know there are some people out there who prefer shorter, punchier video as well. So this is aimed more at those, just as a bit of an experiment anyway. So yeah, please let me know in the comments. And all it remains for me to say now is thanks for watching and take care until next time.